I have another wonderful guest with me. Coming in from Toronto. Let's just begin with a brief introduction and tell us a bit about yourself.
Sure. My name's Michael Nash. Grew up in Newmarket, Ontario, or Aurora, Ontario. So been living up in Newmarket recently that I got back from Prague. But I went to school with Ian here. That's on the show, and then I went to Brock for accounting. I realized I really didn't want to be an accountant.
Yeah.
Pretty boring, and it sucks. But it was a good foundation for finance. So I went into investment banking, and then after I graduated, having done some investment banking internships and part time, I went right into private equity, and I lived in Prague for a year. So I got back in August of 2018, and then I now work at a tech startup in Toronto, helping with sales, partnerships, and just general CTO work. But young startups don't really need full time, CFO.
Hmm.
So that's where we are right now.
That's
Yeah,
awesome.
so
That's
good to
really
be
great.
here. Thanks for having me.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on. I guess I'm, I'm really interested in your time in Europe. So tell me a bit more about Prague. How was that? How that was that time?
Yeah, Prague's great. I mean, it's a very interesting country. Very culturally similar in some ways, and different in others. It's very cheap to live there. It's not a poor country, but it's just a small
Yeah.
economy. So our private equity fund, the main office is in London. So I was in the Prague office, and was also able to get down to Dubai too, which was nice. But Prague, it's good nightlife. The beer too is actually cheaper than water if you want to get a drink in a restaurant. It's cheaper to get a pint than a glass bottle or a bottle of water. So
Yeah,
it
one
was
of the
good
many
living there.
wonders
But
of Europe.
it's not like it's pretty the pace of life is a lot slower too. Right? It's very I think the demographics of the population was older compared to like bigger cities.
Hmm.
Prague was small. I mean, I think it's about 2 million, but pretty spread out.
Yeah.
Not so densely populated as maybe Toronto. And no, it was good. Good times. I had a lot of fun. Didn't get to travel too much outside of that, despite it being pretty central.
Hmm.
Spent about 2 weeks in Austria, and was in Germany for a little bit. So they kept me pretty busy over there. But Austria was beautiful too. And if you're ever in Venice, like Venice is very similar to Prague, except it's a bit nicer. Not as much like graffiti, but it's also about twice as expensive.
Yeah.
It's like a bigger, nicer, more expensive Prague. But Prague's actually very romantic too.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen a lot of the architecture there, and it's really amazing the history behind that city. It's got so much amazing history, and it used to be, the crowning jewel of, academia back a long time ago, and it's amazing that it's a lot of the architecture still stands. A lot of the castles are still there, so that's something everybody can really appreciate from
Yeah,
there.
absolutely. It was untouched by both of the World Wars, so a lot of that architecture is still there, and it's just fun to go around. Go walk around in a park, and there's like an observatory, and it's like Joseph Kepler was there, and so much history.
Yeah.
A lot of it's in English. They'll have most people speak English too, so it's not really hard to navigate. And of course, the Prague Castle is very nice. So if anyone's ever there, there's this really interesting part of it called the story of Prague Castle, and it's like in the catacombs,
Hmm.
and it starts from like most recent times, and it goes back in time. Like each room has like different artifacts from like 100-year time frame back into like the year 900. They have like artifacts dug up from the site before it was even the castle was even built, and yeah, really interesting. That was my favorite part of the that place for sure.
Interesting. And so, I guess before that, did you do much traveling growing up, or did you just stay in Ontario? Or
I was, Florida a few times for family vacations. Not really outside of North America. Go out east to PEI and out west. Go to see Banff, which was really nice. I want to go back up to Banff for
Banff
sure.
is awesome. Have you ever been to Banff, Ian?
I have never been to Banff. I would like to go.
You gotta go
I've
to
been to
Banff.
Whistler.
Oh yeah, Whistler's like
Whistler's
right
kind of
beside
nice.
it. It's
Yeah, oh
really
yeah, we
neat.
just stayed in BC, so
Well, I mean, you got to keep stuff for other trips. I remember going there, driving, and every single corner was like, "Oh, we should go there. Oh, we should go there." But we're like, "Oh, we're running out of time. We got to keep things for the next time we come over."
You have to make choices.
Exactly, exactly. It's always so beautiful, but now it's very touristy. It's very so that's why you can't go in the summer. You have to go when it's not as nice, but at the same time you're gonna be alone up there, which is
Whistler in the winter is very nice.
that's the thing, right? You can do that. Everybody
Anyway,
goes to in the winter goes to Whistler. In the summer they go to Banff and Jasper.
I want to ask Michael about his first job out of university.
Yeah.
He's told me many interesting stories about him owning like buffalo farms in the Middle East and stuff. So I want you to elaborate
Oh
on
my
that.
goodness.
If you can.
Yeah. Let's hear it.
Yeah, I mean the firm had a lot of very diversified investments. In Dubai and in Pakistan we had a water buffalo farm, a very small investment. I mean, it didn't really take up much of my time. Oh, you have a Banff mug there. Okay, that's.
Oh, I didn't even notice. I should mention that I have
Oh
a Banff
yeah.
mug.
Show that off.
Yeah, I mean, so I got to go to Dubai and meet the management there of that company. It was interesting, but smaller investment, but you get like 2% a month cash return, so it wasn't bad. But you can't really put a lot of money into it because it was very risky. So it was like close to like the Afghanistan border. So I didn't go to visit, but my boss, my MD, managing director, is he had gone to visit. And they were shooting like AKs and having a good time up there with the goats and very rural area. So I worked out a lot of different interesting deals there. It was a good time. You work on 10 of them and maybe one will go through. So by the end, some of the more successful ones that we had that are operating right now was the drone company in Florida doing security and surveillance training for drone systems, and that one's pretty interesting. A lot of potential with government contracts. There's that one, and some other medical equipment supply companies too. It's funny, like it was a bit slow actually in the summer, and then I left to go work with my friend John, and as soon as I leave and I started here in about January, it starts really picking up. More money being raised, but I knew it was going to be successful, but it was really just a decision to leave between two good options. My job here is a lot better. It's a better team. I'm working with people who are closer to my age, 20s and 30s rather than 50s and 60s, old guys that have been doing this for a while.
No kidding.
Easier, we're all going to the gym and having a good time. We're all hustling, working here late.
So I guess I should ask you, from like somebody who I guess doesn't do much investing, somebody who goes, who does only like small banking portfolios, what's kind of your advice of like starting off with, what kind of, where do you find startups or where do you find reliable, things to invest in other than going to the bank and doing kind of, those mutual funds, or what's your advice? Other than yeah.
Kind of talking about more like personal investing, or you're interested in like how funds work?
Well, I guess what's your opinion on what's the better alternative to, other than banking, at a regular, at RBC trust funds and stuff like that.
Well, we had on last week a guy who talked about Bitcoin a lot.
Yeah,
I thought that
exactly.
was a very good investment for the future.
Yeah.
I'm a bit more skeptical. What do you think, Michael? Just in general.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Bitcoin has a lot of risks involved too. In terms of my company right now is we're doing payment processing, so I'm very interested in Bitcoin, and obviously that's a big risk to disrupt even us because it's even available right now. I mean, if I can send if I'm trying to send $100 to someone in China for services, a consultation over Skype, and I send it to Western Union and they get $90 versus I send them Bitcoin and they get it for free, right? And if you look at any like payment processing company, Visa, MasterCard, they charge merchants 1 to 3% on transactions.
Yeah.
I mean, they're a small company, it doesn't really matter that much, but I mean, if you're doing millions of dollars in sales, you're looking at real money. You're looking at $300,000, $400,000.
Yeah.
For $100 million or more in sales for that company, right? So depends on. There's a lot of things, that depends on regulations. If governments are allowing businesses to accept it, because as a business owner, it's sort of a no-brainer. If volatility goes down with more with a higher market cap on the Bitcoin network. And there's lots of developments. One of my friends is a Bitcoin developer. He's working with Tim Berners-Lee right now. He was the inventor of the World Wide Web.
Yeah.
And a lot of good tech developments with the Lightning Network and a lot of innovations there in terms of making the payments faster. So I do think that if you could only let me invest in one asset for the next 20 years, I would put my money in Bitcoin. But because of how risky it is, I think that people should buy it, but keep it as a small percentage of their portfolio, single digit percentage, because who knows? Despite all the benefits of cryptocurrencies, we don't really know what the future holds, right? Some kid in India could come up with a Bitcoin 2.0 that's better than Bitcoin, and everybody just uses that.
Well, that's the thing we were talking about. Was there's not just Bitcoin anymore. There's hundreds, if not thousands, of new cryptocurrencies popping up, and there's even Switzerland that's starting its own government-run cryptocurrency, and Canada was almost did it, but the mint got shut down. So it's really weird how the financial institutions, before they were resistant, now they're kind of willing to work with it, because now they're realizing that it's inevitable to have that kind of online currency that makes things. And Mikhail was talking about how that can really benefit countries that have that are in crisis, or that are having some kind of political uprising, where the dollar is completely destroyed and their banks goes for foreclosure, that kind of thing. So they have the alternative of getting that kind of thing, which is really interesting to me. At least there's that aspect.
Sure. Cryptocurrency is basically just a ledger, right? It's a decentralized ledger. So if it's not going to be completely decentralized, there's really no point or benefits in having it over a centralized database, right? So government-backed cryptocurrencies I don't really follow, because of the fact that the government still controls it. So there's not really any benefit of it over Bitcoin. The benefit of Bitcoin is that no government controls it. Now, of course, then the argument is what government wants to give up that power, because the central bank is very powerful and has a lot of control over the interest rate, for example, is a very useful control mechanism, misguided as it may be. But that's the way the world works, so we have to follow in line with how the people in power operate. So, a guy I follow too, you might find interesting, Naval Ravikant. He talks about how a country, say Venezuela, on the planet, you would have the government, say Venezuela, go and buy up percent points or one reserve.
Oh,
Are we having connection issues?
sorry, we're having some poor connection issues. But yeah, that was there's a lot going on in the cryptocurrency.
Is it me or you?
Oh, I think we're good now. Okay, I think we're good now.
Yeah.
Okay, but
So say if Venezuela. Oh, sorry, I don't want to get cut off.
you were cut off probably right in the middle of that.
Yeah, and the idea, I guess, of that is that if, say, Venezuela bought 20% of Bitcoin's market cap in foreign currency reserves, and then declared to its citizens that Bitcoin is now the legal tender, the market value of Bitcoin from all those people buying it would go up. And then the benefit is that it opens that up to other countries, showing that it's something feasible for them to do. And then once other countries then buy into it, the first people in get paid the most, right? So in that scenario, it's but these are very long term, very hypothetical situations, and none of them could work. It's just an interesting thought experiment, I thought.
Sure.
So, Michael, I was just wondering, you said you been to Prague and I watched out in North America, but you said you reached just a minute ago you were in Dubai. You want to tell us about that? Isn't that kind of a culture shock going there?
Sorry, can you repeat that? I got a notification on my computer.
Oh, just tell us about Dubai and what that was like.
I mean, Dubai was fine. It was a lot of fun. I don't want to live there, for full time, for example, right? A lot of it just it's like fake, right? I mean, they have a lot of growth, but I mean, they're trying to it seems like they're trying to like in terms of just a general cultural statement, trying to replicate all of that culture that they see in the West. But being a Muslim country, you have a lot of the people who can afford to preach very conservative maybe Muslim values back in Dubai, and then they'll go off to Morocco or south of France and then party and and do everything a good Muslim wouldn't do, but then come back and then preach that back home, or maybe that might be more Saudi Arabia, but it does happen. I don't know if it's like a common thing, but I mean that doesn't really affect you if you're trying to move there, but it's all right. I mean, certainly it's different. You can't go and buy like alcohol on the street. I've talked to some people who have lived there before, and there's some rumors that if you're and I've heard it from people there too, that if you're like drunk in public, the police could arrest you and put you in jail. And I've heard that from a few different people while I was there. But then I heard it from someone else who's lived there for a long time, and she said it was more of a myth. So I'm not really sure what to believe. I haven't seen any hard numbers on that, but
I think it depends who you are. If you're high up in the families, I don't think you get taken to jail.
Yeah, I mean it's there's a lot of like differences too from the business. Like you can't charge interest, so a lot of companies will charge like a variable rate of return based on the profits of the business equal to approximately 7%. So it's not interest, but it's it's just ways of getting around it. And,
Interesting.
It sounds pretty
like,
damn close to interest to me.
Yeah.
That's really
like a lot of
interesting.
trying to bring in that Western money and innovation at the same time. Trying to innovate there, but I don't really know. It's a lot of stuff going on.
It's really interesting to see now, I guess, geopolitically, you have, Trump and the United States wanting to get out of the Middle East, and then you have Russia and China wanting to go in. They're already in Africa developing that, and so now it's really interesting that they're just pretty much waiting for the Western allies to leave until they start developing their own financial interests in that area, because I mean that's kind of what political powers do.
Yeah, sure. I guess maybe a lot of it depends on oil too. I mean, if U.S. dependence on oil goes down to more nuclear, hopefully, or renewable energy, wind and solar, oil. I mean, oil is always going to be prevalent, and you're always going to have oil. I mean, for plastics and has many other applications of energy generation, but I mean, it'll be a while before say we get dependence on nuclear plants and things like that. But
that's the thing. That's the thing people sometimes having a hard time understand is that things don't happen overnight. It's going to be a transition period, and fossil fuels obviously are something we don't want to incentivize and want to have it go on forever and in the future. But it's part of the equation right now, and if Canada wants to stay relevant and have stay in the G20, stay in the G7, we're a nation that sells oil, and that's kind of we can't just stop overnight selling oil and not have pipelines and do all these things. It's kind of sad to we want to be environmentalists, but at the same time we have to come to terms with the reality that we're facing as a country, and as financially how things work out, how we can't just sabotage an entire economy just for the sake of having less CO2 emissions, even though that Canada already produces less than 2% of the global CO2 emissions. I mean, that's very, very negligible. Canada, well, the thing is Canada's a northern country, so we don't really have a choice, and we have to heat all our houses and drive everywhere in the winter. So it's really inconvenient for that kind of space. But if we go to renewables, obviously that will be reduced. And right now, we're already at 62%. I think that we're already at 62% renewables in Canada. So, that's pretty good. And, we're definitely not the cause of the problem. And we're definitely, an innovator in the future. And that's why it's so hard to see people, talk about pipelines and kind of say that we have to stop now. And it's like, well, I really appreciate that, but it's, things don't happen overnight, and there are things we're doing right now, but it's, so I guess, what do you think of a carbon tax? What's your thoughts on that?
I don't really know. I mean, it's very tough because, I mean, it's like a way of like pricing in and like externality. I mean, in terms of like seeing, I've thought about this before, like seeing like CO2 is like people throwing garbage on the street. I mean, it's like in a real sense it is too, but garbage is more visible, and if someone has to pay to clean that up, right? So because it's global, like, is it the public that has to clean that up? So I do agree with the carbon tax, because it's like, it is pollution. It is garbage that's going on the street.
Yeah.
Even if it's not visible, it does have.
So it's a good idea to disincentivize polluting, which is basically what it is.
Yeah, sure, but like you said, I mean, Canada is like 0.2%. So I mean, does it really matter if we have a carbon tax versus China having a carbon tax?
It would be a lot more efficient and effective there. But the problem I have with it is that it, when you want to tax it, and their short-sighted legislation, really all it does is makes company, well, they pay carbon for everything they truck in and everything, but it ends up, it transfers to the consumer. It's always the consumer that's always paying more, so it's always interesting to see, well, it's like, well, we wanted to disincentivize it, but now we're actually making it more profitable. We're making it more something sought out for companies to do, because they can raise their prices and say, oh, well, it's not our fault, it's the government's fault. They raised that. So I guess the only way they could have really circumvented that was, I don't really know how you circumvent forcing a company to, not pay bonuses to their executives instead of, being more efficient in their managing of recycling and managing of their kind of development, I suppose. I don't know. What do you think about this?
I don't know. I mean, like, carbon tax or not, standing, I'm not really actually confident in any government's ability to really make any positive impacts. And if you look at all of the changes in the planet over the past hundreds of years, it's all been due to technological innovation. There's never really been any government policies aside from maybe those that encourage innovation, but I mean, that's really the culture of the country too. In terms of government side, it's more of like an administrative body, right? So
yeah,
I mean, these systems are so complex. I mean, there's a lot you can say with carbon taxes, and it can remain competitive, and it's a very complex system. But I think really that the real change can happen from private enterprise, like what Elon Musk is doing with renewable cars. To have a way to make it market competitive to where everyone would drive just electric cars, right? And maybe the government will make it a little bit easier, like with carbon tax on say cars, and say it's helping that out a little cheaper, because I do know that a lot of oil companies get tax breaks and things like that. So like move that over to electric cars, but I mean that's a whole other discussion. But just generally, not like the government's like whatever. I've never really seen them do anything too amazing. Maybe like the national parks are pretty good in the States, but protection of private property, right?
Yeah.
Should be more minimal.
Well, Ian, what are your thoughts?
What are my thoughts?
Yeah.
Well, I definitely think the government can do things for the people, but you are right that I think it comes in forms like innovation from people like Elon Musk, right? Like, the government itself is not directly responsible for creating SpaceX, but through the commercial space program through NASA, they've been given billions of dollars in order to do such a thing. And now soon they'll be able to fly people again. So even if they're not directly doing it, they do have an impact. That's a good point. I like that.
So I guess that would be a good example of the positive aspects of privatization and public enterprises being the forefront of that technology and being that kind of leader, because before it was just NASA, it was just government organization, I guess, that took on that endeavor. And yeah, it's never been really replicated ever since then. So for me, that's the positive side of that, but then there's also the negative side of of private sector, especially people who have monopolies, conglomerate monopolies. They have so much influence in politics. When the Prime Minister of Canada meets with Google executives over 100 times in a year, this is super, super concerning, and it's super unprecedented that you have businesses executives advising and probably telling him what he should do for the greater good of the people. And that's really interesting to see. Private sector companies have so much influence and having so much say in state affairs, and in that kind of lobbying goes on all the time, and it's a reality that they kind of influence that. So as opposed to when the government are elected by the people, they're supposed to represent their constituents, but at the end of the day, they ended up supporting the interest of the lobby groups that lobby them all the time. Because who do you listen to? The people that come on your office. And most citizens are busy working. They're not going to go down to their city councilor and talk to them. It's paid lobbyists who are literally paid to lobby government officials. So it's kind of become, this system has become where, well, let's privatize the gains and we'll publicize the losses. Anything that makes money, we're gonna let big conglomerate corporations kind of take the gains, and then anything that healthcare, anything that social programming, the working class can pay for that as well. So what do you think?
I mean, like, monopolies are absolutely anti-capitalist, right?
Yeah.
But it's tough because it's like, you have, efficiencies that you gain from scale, scaling logistics, all those different systems. So it's a tough question of, like, how and when, like, to break up those monopolies. But, it comes down to like, inequality, because, in terms of, it's sort of related, because in any, like, capitalist system, and, capitalism definitely, has shown to be, the best option. But, monopolies are definitely anti-capitalist, like Facebook, Google. All these big tech companies are anti-capitalist, right? It's a monopoly. So,
but it's so funny because they're so successful, and people don't use Bing; they use Google. So it's so
sure.
it's so hilarious
it's like,
that.
How do you break that down? Like, it's
Yeah.
a tough question. I would have no idea where to start with that. But, like, I know too, like, from history, like, inequality, it always goes in cycles. Like, there's always going to be periods of less inequality, and then it goes to more inequality. So either, in the past, in terms of, like, government too, and just in general population inequality, there'll be, like the communist revolution, or like the French Revolution too, redistributing that wealth. But too, it's not always like to be like violent revolutions. I mean, a lot of it times is just a slow change. So you could argue that if, like, the French Revolution didn't happen,
Yeah.
Would wealth of France still have been redistributed over time? Yeah, probably. Just through policy and legislature of just people just being happy. But I mean, every situation is different too, right? It's not always like a one thing or the other. But with, in terms of, like, large companies, how is it going to be broken up? Is it going to be maybe broken up over time? Because there's arguments too with with that, like, newcomers coming up, like in Canada, like, we're disrupting a lot of the big banks here, and it's disrupting because their tech eventually gets old, right? So, say a large corporation like Amazon, are they always going to be in the very forefront, or are you going to have some guy come around with a new solution, and they never thought of it, some new tech?
I mean, it's really interesting when recently Twitter they did an interview with Jack on Joe Rogan. I don't know if you watch Joe Rogan podcasts, but that was a really really good podcast. Him with Tim Pool, and they were talking about how Twitter and how a lot of social media have they have political biases and they have certain kind of interests in that. So uh, and there's really no accountability other than what they perceive, what their perception is, and what they want to do is basically, it's not like a government where there's a high commission if somebody does something unethical and there's a bias. They can do hearings and committees, but for this, when it's a private sector company, they can just have a lawyer deflect everything and just say, well, that's our policy. So it's where's the accountability in private companies that have so much influence in elections, so much influence on society? And it's like, it can be damaging. And it's also, now that the Supreme Court ruled that the president's account can't ban other people's account, it's become a human rights, freedom of speech kind of issue. It's become a thing where it's said, Twitter is a platform where everyone has the right to be on. Well, not exactly that, we know that because they're banning people, but in principle, that's what it's technically supposed to be. It's supposed to be an open platform. And when a state official can't ban people for being inappropriate or for doing things, for doing hateful things, it's kind of a double standard.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, well, Twitter is like the best that we have really right now in terms of freedom. But eventually, and I think there are a bunch of projects in the works right now for completely open and free social platforms, maybe completely decentralized, maybe backed by some cryptographic protocol. Certainly in terms of anyone having that belief of freedom of speech and all of that, and that sort of leads to direct democracy as well, because the U.S. really isn't a democracy; it's an oligopoly, right? If you look at, I saw a good study of like what the likelihood of a law being passed if like every single person was 100% for it, and it was like 30% likelihood it would be passed, and if just nobody was for it, it was still 30% likelihood it would be passed, right? So it's really showing that the average person, your vote doesn't matter at all in the States, at least. Like there's no point in really voting in this system until there's like a direct democracy. So the way it's really run, it's all, I mean, it's all made up anyway. I mean, this is all, everything we were talking about is all human creation, right? I mean, none of this is,
it's all, well, constructivism tells us that, yeah.
It really is, yeah. It really is what we want to make of it, right? And so we're in control and we make those decisions. So if it was like a direct democracy, that's probably where, things will be going with technology. It's just so much easier to do that, but I mean, we'll have to see things go. It'll just be interesting.
For sure.
See,
well, I said it to Mikhail last time as well. We trust our financial banking information. We trust our money on the internet now, but we don't trust, doing elections on an app or doing elections online or doing referendum questions by, on your phone. That would be the best direct democracy I could think of. But obviously they're saying, oh, that could be hacked. But oh, well, your banking information can also be hacked. But you're still using your online banking. You don't seem very concerned about that. You should be very concerned about that. So it's kind of weird kind of argument in that case.
Or like this, I mean, the people who make the algorithms that show what you're seeing on Facebook and Twitter, those are really the most powerful people in the world right now.
Yeah.
Because those are actually manipulating, manipulating sounds like it's nefarious, but, those people are actually the ones that have the power to control what the, general population sees and what they're seeing on those issues, because there's so much, so many news articles, and depending on what the algorithm routes, that really sways public opinion. So, what happens when the government realizes this and says, okay, well, these platforms that have so much control, shouldn't those be regulated? Because they're the ones that are really controlling what people are voting for, right? So that's another reason why free speech, platform that isn't controlled by governments is so important. But in terms of like elections too, I mean, with the internet, it's really showing that all the elections in the states at least are going to be Trumps and Bernies from here on. It's always going to be the extremes, populist, because you have these small groups of the population that have a large motivation to go out and spread their opinions, and then most people just don't care. Most people are like centralist and
Absolutely, that's the whole destruction nature of social media and just regular media coverage, news media coverage in the first place is outrage sells and outrage gets clicks. So if you put a big headline that says something really outrageous that's completely false or completely derogatory or whatever, and they say, oh, it really gets their emotions going, and they click on it because they need to find out the truth behind this post. And this is why the least among us are the ones that lead us in politics. The least among us you have in the United States and in Canada as well. It's very apparent that big talk gets you there, but it doesn't get you further than that.
Sure. So in combination of that with free and open speech platforms online, a way to sort of maybe mitigate that is to find and have people that have shared block lists. So if you are have your own Twitter account like that, like my block list, having people who you mute, or people who get angry, or people that you don't want to follow, and then you can share your block list so other people can go and see and block the same people, or make their own decisions on whether or not they want to block. But it's a good starting place for that. And then you have like sort of trusted people that you get up, but of course it would always be open. So at any point, if those people started spewing maybe their own narrative that isn't well, I mean, of course you're always gonna, I mean, there's no real way around getting groups. So you'll get people like some anti-vax groups that'll follow a person and share that block list with people who block all of like every mainstream medical journal or things out there. So they're still getting that that circle jerk or whatever, echo chamber.
Yeah.
But I mean, now with the internet, there's no real way to get around that without starting to block people, like say Twitter, banning accounts. But it's like, then who has the power to actually ban those accounts? There's good arguments saying that like everyone has free speech, but it's not Twitter's responsibility to have to share your speech, which I like. But it's like, then on the other hand, it's like, well, then it circles back to this, because then they have the power to block people, they have the power to control those algorithms, what people are seeing,
and they were on Tim Pool was saying on the podcast, and Joe Rogan, they were saying, that's the entire point, that they were creating their own echo chambers, and they were living in that kind of world where they were out of touch with what was really going on, and what the reality was. And it's so interesting that they do have all the power, and maybe they don't even, and obviously it's all speculation to decide if they do really have nefarious intent, or are they just not aware of what's happening. A lot of people say that there are nefarious intentions. It's kind of those things like a conspiracy. You can't really prove it because they covered their steps so well. That's why it's such a beautiful conspiracy. That's why you can never prove conspiracies.
I think that the only way to really get around that is to have really free and open marketplaces where you assign value to things like that. So in terms of like a grand scale thing, if you look at, like the U.S. like culture is very fragmented. I mean, there's already, the internet has maybe like, there's always been different groups, but I think the internet has really revealed, different segments of like culture, like differences between the West and East Coast versus the center.
Mm-hmm.
So then I can't see like I could see like an interesting future where you have a lot of very fragmented, small, independent city-states of people with borders that you're able to immigrate to more freely than we have that now with countries. And those smaller city-states will band together naturally for protection and defense. And I mean, we can go into technology and how violence stipulates that and makes it, and then drone technology makes it easier for those city-states to defend themselves from outside threats.
Are you talking about the European Union?
Well, the EU, I mean, is I mean, a lot of the countries. I think like a better way to put it would be like Switzerland. Like a lot of Switzerland's, like their government structure is very, very interesting to me because, like, who's the president of Switzerland right now? Like, I don't think a lot of like Swiss people even know that because even if there were no central government, I've read that a lot of the towns and cities they all have they're all self-sustaining, right?
Yeah.
They're all able to operate. But then when you get a bunch of them competing with each other, not just working together with each other. Like I'm not sure. I don't know enough about the European Union to say it's a good model, but I really just mean like to have a lot of these smaller like Switzerlands that are able to compete with each other. So you have those groups, you have those echo chambers, but then you have the marketplace of trade and competition between them to really show, which one's right, right? And so so you go and you live in an anti-vax city, and half your population is dead because none of you believe in vaccines. Well, that's the way for a free marketplace to decide on who is right and who is dead, I guess, in this case. So,
But I guess that's the problem with the internet. I guess that's the problem with the internet. It won't be segmented into cities like that. It'll be waves on the internet, and it'll affect people everywhere in all cities, right? Because there'll be anti-vaxxers and flat earthers, not just in one city. They'll be everywhere.
Yeah, I'm talking like a very long-term, utopia or dystopia, maybe.
Sure.
We'll see.
Yeah.
But I mean, just as a way of organizing, because like if you look at like violence too, in terms of like military technology, which I think Ian is pretty interested in too. Like we used to have, and there's a good book called The Sovereign Individual. I think that goes into this. So the thesis of that book is really that in the past you had hunter-gatherers. People lived in tribes that are ruled by like a chieftain in the tribe, and then we went to the agricultural age, and that's why we had kingdoms managed by a central king, which was authority because you need knights to pay any taxes to guard those fields.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that we have the industrial age, where we have factories that are able to easily be destroyed, but they produce a lot of things, so you need big armies to defend those factories, and you have nation states that rule the planet. After that, we had the atomic age, which had superpowers with the nukes ruling the planet. Now we have the information age, and we have a lot of different very interesting technologies that are budding. Like I mentioned drones, where it makes assassinating people really easy. Like you could have a drone with like a face tracking technology, an ID. This is the person's face we want to target. Really cheap to make. A tiny bit of an explosive on each one. And then just you mass distribute them. You can't really stop that, in terms of technology we have, because it's automated, right? If there's AI software, there's no radio-controlled frequency. So, but of course,
that's a scary future. You just that's a scary future you just described.
Well, on the other hand, it trivializes war, right? I mean, we don't really need mass-scale wars anymore. We don't have the need for. I mean, why would you invade another country? Like, you need land. Like, we can grow food on 1/10 of an acre that we could back in the past, right? I mean, all of the top companies are all technology companies. That's where the value is information.
And right? They don't even see borders for the most part, only maybe for legal tax reasons, but they, companies are ready and willing to operate, between and within borders of various countries. You have giant corporations setting up shop in Beijing because they're offering zero interest taxes, which is nice.
Sure. And that's a good point too. I know that that wealth tax was a pretty hot topic too. So it's because like you said, companies operate within borders. So if you start taxing like the rich in the States, what was it, 70%? Yeah, you're just gonna move to a different country, right? And then all of those jobs are gonna be gone, right? So it's like, what are you gonna do? It's a hard situation, whatever, for sure. But that's definitely not like the answer. It's just like a miss. It's good intentions for sure.
But I guess that goes to really supporting local and being self-sufficient, self-reliant, like those kind of Scandinavian states, is really beneficial because you don't rely off of international kind of you don't rely on it as much. I mean, we're Canada, we don't grow food in the winter. That's kind of a big problem. But other than that, it's probably in our best interest to, support local and even though if it is that's kind of the disconnect we see with that, where yeah, the companies do leave, but Canada, the unlike a developing country, I feel like Canada has so much money to be made, and you have the giant corporations make billions on in Canada. So if you're asking for a few more percentage, if you're asking for a decimal points amount of money, and they threaten to leave, it's like, well, I'm asking for a little bit more, and you're willing to throw all of your trillions you're making here away because I'm asking for decimal points. It feels like it's those kind of threats are a bit taken a bit too seriously when Canada is like, well, we make you a lot of money, so what is it to you that we take a little bit?
I mean, it just comes down to the numbers game, right? So it depends on the
Yeah.
specific situation. I mean, if it's a net positive to stay, then we'll stay. But if the moment it doesn't make any sense, then just there's no reason why, right?
Sure. I guess that's why companies have so much power in national in state affairs now, is that they do have that kind of weighing power. I guess it's kind of like in the house, back then you'd have houses that would pledge allegiances to kings, and then they would have their internal negotiations and their internal struggles. It's kind of like that, where companies are the ones influencing states, and they're influencing the state going on. We have somebody saying hello. Game Over Talk Show. That's awesome. Hello, Game Over Talk Show. So Ian, what do you have any comments to make?
Do I have any comments to make? Well, the whole thing about multinational corporations is that, like, I don't think if we're gonna charge 70% tax on Coke, I don't think Coca-Cola is gonna stop selling Coke in Canada. But you do have a point about, well, if they made Coke here, then Coca-Cola, then they might not anymore if they're charged that much, right? So it's kind of like give or take, right? What do you
Well, so
charge
it's like,
them
okay,
tax
so
on?
you leave, well, then another company is going to come in and take the monopoly you're just leaving behind, Well, if Coca-Cola leaves, that means Pepsi gets all the business now, So it's like, well, you're going to stab yourself in the leg just to be vindictive to a country, or, obviously.
Yeah, it's like two different things. It's like I think that 70% was like personal income tax. I'm not sure if it was, like if you had like, I mean, if look at China's billionaires. I mean, China, they're most of them are dead or trying to get out of the country, right?
Yeah.
And then you get, okay, well, if all of the top people, the people who have added that much value, that they're able to create billions of dollars, and then they want to leave your country, like how much innovation is the country going to have, right? You want to be able to encourage them. Like if everyone was a software engineer, I mean, everyone would be retired in like 20 years, right? I mean, people would just create robots to do all the work because no one wants to do the work, right? So, you just want to, try to, like, that's, the government for sure to encourage that, and even have people from outside countries move in.
Isn't that inevitable, though?
That have that talent, so people should be rewarded for their work, and they say, okay, well, I could work here, and then to have 70% of that be gone, or I could just move to Vietnam for,
Yeah.
And then just keep that.
That's kind of the tragedy of commons, if even if we're doing it right, it doesn't make our neighbors have to do it right, and then people can just go and live where it's better beneficial for them in the short term, because we're humans, right? We're very selfish as human beings.
The key distinction to do with that whole thing is that, people are like, oh, they're not, like Jeff Bezos, whatever, like, oh, tax 70%. Like when he created Amazon, he's not stealing wealth from people. He's creating wealth that didn't exist before.
Yeah.
He's not literally not taking anything from anybody else. So it's like, let's say 70% on that. It's literally trying to steal from him. Then of course the arguments there for workers at the Amazon storage facilities, bad conditions and being underpaid. Of course that's a bad situation. Like nobody who wants that too, right? But if there were no Amazon, there wouldn't be any of those jobs. Period. Now, okay, then there's the argument that could it have been another company that pays more maybe, but
it was eBay before Amazon, right? There's always been an online, Shopify. There's always been online market spaces. Maybe not as popular, but
And I mean, the people that work there too is, it's always going to be, there's always going to be positive and negatives, but I mean, that doesn't even take into account all the benefits for the, customers and all the money that people have saved from buying Amazon that way outweighs, any, if you're talking about, oh man, I'm forgetting my, different theories of ethics here. Everybody wins, or I'm not going to even try right now, but
Sure.
my ethics class there. There's different theories, Kant and net benefit for all of society, I guess, like net positive. So like if that's like -1 for the workers, but like +5 for all of the cost savings, that's like a net benefit versus it's like maybe deontological or something. I don't know. I'm not even. But whereas because it's not good for those people, it doesn't matter. So there's not really like one right answer. It's like sort of interesting to think about, but then again, none of us have any control over that, so like I'm not worried about it. But like that's just an interesting thought, right?
I'm
Yeah.
just wondering what you think about. So you said Jeff Bezos, he creates that wealth from. He's not taking it from someone else. But what about the fact that that wealth could have been going somewhere else, say like the local community, opposed to a multinational corporation?
What do you mean? I mean, by creating Amazon, so new information or something new is like by definition a surprise, right? So because it's a surprise, new information, you can't like just say that it would have come up like and gone into the local community because it was something that is novel, it's new, that hasn't existed before, right? So like the benefits of having Amazon, like say the cost savings, I would say, for people buying things online, could very well go into the local community, right? I mean, if you're saving money buying products online, then you have more disposable income to go and spend on, your own community. So, you can't really control how people spend their money.
I think Ian's point was more trying to see it as well, if I'm buying, I have my mixer here and I bought it off of Amazon. Instead of buying it off of Amazon, I could have went to my local music store and bought it off of there for probably more, because obviously they have to make bigger margins because they have a store to upkeep and everything. So that's kind of the thing, is that we're, Amazon kills stores because it's more convenient just to buy it online. But then it's so funny to see they've gone full circle now, because they now have Amazon bookstores. So they killed off chapters, they killed off the bookstores, and now they've become the bookstores. It's kind of like Walmart, taking over, like, oh, we're going to sell tools now. We're going to be a grocery store now. And then the local grocery stores kind of, have to close because everybody goes to Walmart. Everybody goes to Amazon because it's cheaper, it's more convenient. And why wouldn't you? You can't really blame consumers for trying to save money. Middle class people don't really have, a lot of the population live paycheck to paycheck, so they don't really have that luxury of, I'm going to support local and pay things more expensive, because society is being formed that way. Society is becoming where, you work for the big conglomerate companies that pay you the wage, instead of people becoming entrepreneurs and starting their own, small businesses. And I feel like that's the thing everybody doesn't, people talk a big game about being an entrepreneur, saying, oh, I'm an entrepreneur. But they're investors. They don't actually run businesses. They're not on the ground managing the employees, talking, doing the finances, doing the customer service. They're not running the day-to-day operations. They're kind of just moving numbers around, and they call themselves entrepreneurs. And it's like, well, throwing money around doesn't really make you an entrepreneur. A real entrepreneur is somebody that owns their own business, right?
Yeah, I've never met anyone who said that. I mean, for us as investors, we also like our fund, and it depends on the fund too, right? A lot of them will take management stakes in the company to help them grow.
Sure.
Right? But it depends on the fund. But I've never really met anyone who said they're like private people that like what you was saying. It really circles back to monopolies not being capitalist, right? It's an anti-capitalist. So like very well, that's like a common tactic too in economics, having lowering your price for any given market, weeding everyone else out so they have to close down, and then raising it back up, right? So having competition where you keep that price low is always going to be more beneficial. So like with Amazon too, I mean Amazon, what they're doing is they own all of the customer relationships. So that mom and pop store can sell on Amazon, but they don't own those customers. They don't own the data. Amazon's taking all of that data, and what they're starting to do is introduce their own products, which compete with the sellers that are currently on Amazon, using all of the data from all of the sellers, sort of against them, right? So eventually, I mean, if it would continue, Amazon would just be like Walmart, right? They would be selling all of the products on Amazon, and you wouldn't have those independent people selling on Amazon, right? And then, of course, if they're the only ones selling because they have all of the data, all their customer relationships, then they can raise the prices, and I mean the customers get fucked, right?
So how do we avoid monopolies then? I guess that's my question, because it's definitely hard to avoid when they lobby governments, and when you got a lot of money, you got a lot of money to spend to make sure you don't lose it.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's a tough question. It's a complex question as well. I'm not. Well, my best. I mean, this is like a total guess here. Would be just to for a government, say we're talking about what we can do, just to increase innovation. Increase the next guy who comes up with something better than Amazon. Because if they are raising the prices and they are weeding people out, then maybe there's a way that someone could come up with a way to have those private sellers sell on like maybe it's sorry to bring up crypto again, but like a distributed marketplace that doesn't take a fee,
Yeah.
because Amazon takes fees. So right now, I mean, if you want to sell on Amazon, it is expensive. You have to pay if they're putting the things in your warehouse and doing the logistics all for you. Or maybe there's a new marketplace that would come up, and the market, the economies just work out that, maybe it's not as good as Amazon, but it's cheaper. Yeah. And you can't, dictate what's on the marketplace, right? So I think there's a lot of like potential for things like that, but
for sure, there's
I don't know, like in the past, like you could break up companies too. It's really hard to break up a tech company because the value is in. That's the aggregation theory. The more like users on a platform, the more valuable it is to all of the users that are already on the platform, right? So like Apple, if you look at Apple, like if they made a good product, like that's you can see that as the platform is the iPhone, right? But people wouldn't just use the iPhone without the App Store, right? So they own the relationship with the customers, like Amazon owns that relationship.
Yeah.
But then they open it up to third-party developers to have more innovation on that, but they still own that platform. So the more people using the iPhone, the more access to people those developers have. So it doesn't encourage innovation that way. So it's that's the model that we have right now.
Sure. And that's I guess with the sales of like products, I forget what the app's name is called, but there's an app where you, instead of you trade services. So basically how it works is, if you're you're a makeup artist or you're a hairdresser, you can offer your service as a hairdresser, and then in exchange you exchange services instead of instead of using currency. Basically, oh, I need to get my computer fixed, you need a haircut, I need my computer fixed, we can help each other out and make a deal happen. Which is, before, that was like, how do you that's the logistics of that. With 8 billion people on the earth, this is going to be impossible. But now with the internet, that's the thing with the app, it's so interesting because with the algorithms that it's done, it's able to narrow down what you're searching for, and the circles cross together, and then you see, oh, I'm in the same category, and then there's these people that are looking for what I'm offering and are looking, and I have what I want. And I guess that's like a long-term, more, people-based kind of like eBay kind of idea, and not, decentralized. It's more locally run. It's because, I mean, it's just everybody doing it with each other. It's kind of like Lyft, or it's kind of like the sharing what is it called?
Uber?
Right?
Yeah.
It's like Uber. Instead of having a taxi service which is insured, which has certifications, you just hop in with some stranger that you're paying, and it's not regulated, right? So there's kind of like those loopholes that people are going through, and obviously it's causing problems, and a lot, obviously, like taxi companies really don't like the fact that Uber exists, because that's costing them money. And that's kind of the evolving world where old institutions don't have time to adapt or get in line with the moving times, because things with the internet, things are moving so fast that it's impossible to track, or impossible to philosophize what'll be the next app, what'll be the next big Amazon or the next big Facebook that'll influence elections, influence politics. And that's kind of the chaos. There's always chaos in human development, I think. So there's always going to be that element. Now it's not so much feudal with swords, now it's with words on the internet. So I guess, yeah.
Best of luck to that app, but I mean, I think we really solved that with money.
Yeah, I guess, yeah,
Like,
that money was
money
always,
is just a means of transferring value.
yeah.
I mean, there's a difference between money and wealth. Like if you own like an asset that is producing money, well, you see, I mean, money is just a way to transfer the value from one service to the value of the other service. So, I mean, it'd be interesting to see. I mean, maybe people will use it, but I mean, that's the thing. It's an experiment, and maybe it'll fail, or maybe it'll succeed. And either way, there'll be valuable information. Some people could look at that and say, okay, it failed. Why did it fail? Maybe this is still a good idea, but maybe they just didn't do it right. And that's always good. Like innovation like that is always like, you should never, like just because like my first impression is that that it wouldn't work, but it doesn't mean they shouldn't
Yeah.
do it. Or I could be wrong, right? I have no idea. But like with institutions, institutions perpetuate the problems that they were meant to solve. Like the education institution, I mean, it's archaic the way that things are taught. It's really just social signaling now, right? But there's a difference too between like people who are like super motivated to learn and people who like want to just get a job,
Yeah.
right? So it's a credential that you put on your resume. But if you really wanted to learn, I mean, like Harvard puts courses up online. Like you just take the Harvard courses and get a Harvard education for free. But
It's
on
more
the
for
other
the
hand,
piece
you
of
get that
paper, for the
social
status.
signal.
Yeah.
There's a lot of like good, like interesting ways to like, get around that I think like there's something called the Lambda School that I saw. I thought was very interesting. So they don't charge any tuition, but they take 20% of your salary after you start earning like 50K a year after you graduate. So they have a direct incentive for you to succeed, or they don't get paid.
Yeah.
Right. So
That's
in terms
really
of that
interesting.
versus you go to a class and your teacher doesn't give a shit about you. He can say whatever he wants because your teacher isn't responsible for if you're successful or not outside of the class, right? So he could, I mean, there's it's like macroeconomics, like you can just bullshit and hide things in theory. Like some things obviously you can't, like STEM. Like STEM obviously is good and will need to be educated. But I mean, with the internet, I mean everything's available online for free anyways, right? So it's always like a tough situation too. And I mean, you could say that too for other institutions, like for you're saying for taxi companies, right? I mean, instead of a medallion, Uber just figured out a way to do it with social signaling. You rate people, and if you get lower star ratings, then that's it, and you can't drive anymore. So you get that trust in people without those medallions. So of course the taxi companies are going to want to try to legislate it and get away from Uber because they didn't think of that, they didn't innovate.
Yeah.
Well, that's how things work, and they are providing a lower, less of a service.
They're really at the disadvantage because they're regulated by city and municipal and provincial governments, so they have to pay their permit dues, they have to pay union dues, they have to pay higher insurance fees for their taxi company. That's the thing with Uber, is like they're not insured, you're just insured on the person's private insurance. So basically, that's the thing, that separates Uber and regulated certified service, is that when a taxi service, if they do anything and you need to do a complaint, who do you call? The city of Ottawa. It's the 311 number whenever you go in a cab. But if it's an Uber, then it's like, oh, they did something inappropriate, and I want to make a complaint. And then so it's done, that would be done through the private company and not through a city governed kind of and controlled institution that would be doing
Right.
that. Yeah.
I mean, okay. I mean, so I mean, it could be at a disadvantage, but I mean, that's just how the market works. I mean, Uber, they've won, and
Absolutely.
try to like regulate it away. Like, it's too late because the idea is already out there that it's better, that people like using it more, and that's really it. I mean, people lose their jobs all the time, but like technology too, I think it creates more jobs over the long term than it destroys. But that's the thing too. Like, you have to be educated. Like, AI is gonna like self-driving cars. Like, Ian, we know, like Paul Ashbourne is working at a self-driving car company, self-driving truck company,
Hmm.
and there's a lot of truck drivers everywhere,
It's
and
top three jobs
it's
in the
such a
U.S. I think.
no-brainer to me. Like self-driving cars, like cars and trucks. Obviously, like cars are terribly dangerous. I don't think anyone should be allowed to drive cars. If robots are going to be able to do it better, are people going to die in testing? Sure, but I mean, that's the nature of innovation, right? I mean, it's going to be a net benefit, so it's going to happen one way or the other, because I mean, it's just software, right? And then software
So you
is
think
just
they're gonna
ideas.
ban driving altogether at some point when they have the technology down?
Like iRobot.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
Yeah, that's
it's
pretty good.
I definitely understand the sentiment because vehicles are can be considered and used as weapons. They can murder people, and I've been victim of that. I've been victim of a drunk driver car crashing into me, and I mean, it is really terrifying, and it is really unfair to everybody. When you can literally kill someone, and that's never ever appropriate and never should be something that happens. So if we do have a way to circumvent, going from the after cigarettes and gun violence, it's or no, it's probably even more deadly than gun violence. Car accidents,
Canada,
absolutely.
absolutely.
It's probably the highest killer in Canada. So it's if we can reduce that to a lot by a lot, there's no reason why we wouldn't do that for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. But talking about like people who are like truck drivers,
Yeah.
right? It's like, what are they gonna do when they all go out of the job, right? So it's like, they're gonna be obviously complaining and saying, oh, it's terrible, but people are not dying because of it's gonna happen, right? It's a net benefit, and I mean,
I
it's
mean,
up
it's a
to
long
the
term
people that
goal
we're
and it
saying.
has the benefits for the long term.
Sure.
And that's the thing with it's gonna be disadvantageous for people because I mean we're living through the system and obviously, yeah, a lot of people lose their jobs. There's no more. We're closing coal mines, not opening coal mines, hopefully. So those
Yeah.
kind of jobs are going to be phased out, and
I mean, even like
realistically,
jobs too,
realistically,
right?
the only way is if you're young, if you're still young, you can retrain, you can relearn another trade, or you can learn, you can get another education because people change fields all the time. It's not the idea where you stay in your field for 40 years. That's kind of an old concept. So people
Sure.
on average stay in their profession for 7 to 10 years, and then they move on to the I was a real estate, now I'm gonna do this, or I'm gonna go into doing different kind of business because you only have one life. You don't want to just do one thing for your entire life. Or that's kind of the sentiment nowadays. So that's kind of changing the workforce. That's changing. Well, we see that already. That now business loyalty relationships completely have changed. Before, businesses would invest in their employees. They would pay for your extra education. They would pay for your masters, or they would get you extra education and extra training. Yet now it's completely disincentivized. It's always short-term contracts. No permanent position, no tenures, no nothing like that. You're on contract yearly basis, and it's kind of sad to see that because how are you supposed to get a mortgage if you don't have a long-term permanent safe work environment? And it's always you might go a year without steady income, and you're going to default on a mortgage because you had a rough year. It's really kind of a troubling, kind of transition that we're going into. And in the States, this has been catastrophic. In the States, even in Canada, most people live with debt, huge amounts of debt. And this is kind of the result of that, I think.
Yeah, I mean that's why we might need universal basic income at some point, because I mean if you can train somebody to do a job, you can train a computer to do it better, 24 hours a day, right? I mean, even not even just truck drivers, but white collar jobs. I mean, that's why I got out of finance into tech sales, because I mean a lot of that's being squeezed out by software and automation. A lot of these high paying jobs are going to be going away anyways, right? Over in the next few years, because why would you pay an employee to do it? Especially if you're in finance and you're doing data management, or you're making financial
data
models.
analysis. Yeah, that's
a lot of that can be automated away, right? So it's like you can be retrained, but like at some point, there might just be robots doing everything. Right? So,
a lot of people say that the AI is the end singularity because at that point, we don't know what's going to happen, because if it can do anything and if it can do it better than us, what does that mean? What is the implications of that?
Yeah, you mean like artificial general intelligence, but I mean I was reading some stuff on there, but I forget right now. So there's I'm not sure. Like, I mean, who knows? Because like what is intelligence you get into, and if there was like a super smart ant, I mean it'd still be an ant, right? It would just go about ant things in a super smart way, right? Like a computer is an entirely logical operation. There's that, I mean, good story. I'm sure everyone's read about the one where it's like a robot designed to do human handwriting. It's like just get better at handwriting sentences, and it's okay. Well, it gets connected to the internet and just speeds up the process. It's okay. Well, now we need more paper, so we're gonna control the human economy because we need to make everything just produce paper for this and manipulate everything, and eventually you get nanotechnology. It develops because we run out of resources, and it needs to rearrange the atoms to make more paper so it can handwrite more and more letters, and then it sends it out to other planets. So it's like there's like some fun things like that where it's like it's not like it's completely logical, right, for that one purpose. But that's the very things that we can't know what it would do because we're not completely logical ourselves. So it's like at that point, if it but we're still a very long way away from anything like that. It can. There's a difference between like machine learning and computers that can do everything better than humans, right? So, but like I think I really like the idea of marketplaces too, because we were talking about Bitcoin and also like self-driving cars, and I think you can combine those two ideas as well in terms of like, so not even necessarily like having like an AI manage it, but having like a marketplace for that. So it does connect. I want to bring this up because it connects with a few of the points that we talk about governance, overarching rules like society. So if you look at like the street road system, you have traffic lights and stop signs and speed limits, and those are all regulated by a central entity. The police and the government regulates how the rules of the road operate. But if you have self-driving cars, and especially with cryptocurrency, you could have like bidding on cars. So if you would imagine intersections without stoplights or street signs, and when you leave home in your self-driving car, you would say, I want to get to work in 5 minutes, and it would cost you $2. Or if you want to get there in 4 minutes, it would cost you $5. Because what you would have to do is for each interaction with another car, you would have a large like a bidding war, like how Google Ads operates, how you show ads. And so it's just another way to structure governance of a system through markets, and cryptocurrencies really let you do that, to bring markets into places that.
So it'll be kind of like pay roads, right? So if you want to get to a faster commute, you have to pay to use the payroll.
Sort of, but like happening at lightning speed with a million other cars around you, calculated to where all those other cars' destinations are going, and saying in real time, if you want to go someplace faster, you have to pay more money into the system, right? And then that's a way to manage doing that, like email systems as well. You can send unlimited emails for spam, and it's free.
Yeah.
But what if you're able to have a thousandth of a penny cost for an email? what that reduces spam on systems because suddenly you have to start paying.
Yeah.
What do you have to pay? Well, it depends on how many emails are going out in the system, and suddenly you have, well, how important is this email that I want to send it to, maybe 50 people instead of 2,000 people to spam because it's going to cost me, this much more, right?
Yeah.
So like that's why I'm sort of like interested in all these different technological innovations because you have a lot of potential for governance and bringing in politics. Like it combines a lot of different fields that I think a lot
So
of people
does AI centralize all the politics and all the resources management of our society, thus making a prime minister or president not necessary anymore? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, like that's an interesting thought too. I think that might go the opposite way, where there's no centralized entity. Like I don't have any confidence in the central bank's ability to run economy because it's a complex system, right? It's not an exact science. You can't say I'm going to raise the interest rate by a basis point, and it's going to have this effect on the economy because it's complex. I mean, it's like the weather. You can't predict the weather patterns that are going to come out of it, right? So in terms of like the idea of like an AI centrally managing all that, I'm not even sure that an AI would be able to do that. I mean, the computer and processing power would be astronomical, and it might just be served better by having a free, open marketplace where where money is assigned to certain aspects where it wasn't able to before. Like you can't assign, for example, for driving, like you can't assign I want a value to getting to work faster. It's all internal, right? You can't bid on other people and their value of them getting to work faster. Like they're late, and they say, I want to pay $10 to instead of $5. I want to get there faster. Now the other cars, oh, well, your time just got bumped down a little bit because this guy, he's really wanting to go to work faster.
Yeah.
Instead of like now, you have someone gets cut off in traffic and someone's speeding and it's dangerous. Do that for the whole, do that for her. Half of the systems that the government manages, right? Like, it's just,
I guess it really,
it's a complex system. Like,
yeah,
you can't have something managing it.
I guess it really depends on the kind of algorithm you do with, well, it's all what we make it. So if we do want to have that kind of commercial, access where, pay for access, you pay for that convenience of going faster and getting that priority. It's kind of like when you pay Google or you pay advertisers to put you on the priority list and to put you right at the front on the first search, right? So
and too, if you're in advertising, and people who are in advertising know this, is that you do have machine learning algorithms now that modify and are able to structure that what your bid is. You need a lot of data for that if you're doing that, because there's manual bidding and there's a lot of ways to manage that, but to really optimize what those bids exactly are, like that's where AI comes in. But it's in terms of like each individual actor in the system has their own data and their own way of running that. So it's not like one centralized overarching thing. It's like you have that smart data processing, because like the bids, like for example, like on the marketplace itself is done. Like it'd be totally open. But then you have individual actors having that AI to manage what you're going to bid at maybe certain times, and how we would manage that. Like you would need some sort of machine learning algorithm to do that. So there is a combination. Like I said, there are many different fields. With AI and economics and marketplace and finance and governments and governments as well. It all really kind of comes into one. Of course, technology and cryptographic protocols and all of those fun stuff. But it's multidisciplinary, which I think was why a lot of this stuff is interesting to a lot of people, because you can combine different aspects of knowledge, depending on your background, into it. So like my background is finance. I'm very interested in open marketplaces instead of centralized entities, right? But someone else, like you guys are more interested maybe in politics and having that managing how that could manage society. And like there's also, if it's an open marketplace, like what if there's like an actor that tries to like gamify the system and get more benefit, and how that changes the dynamics of how everything works, and what the cultural differences are. If some people are able to afford going faster on their cars all the time, and you say people like, oh, I want to do that now, and then there's always that eternal struggle of, is there's always going to be inequality in terms of that, and it's always going to rise and lower, and so there's always going to be like interesting conversations around
Well,
that.
it's always awkward to see, how big and profitable, medicine, pharmaceutical industry has become, or, just the fact that, all these things become profitable and privatized, just like the U.S. Prison system is privatized, and it's we're kind of in a weird dilemma where war is profitable, so that's why they have more war. But it's so weird to see that kind of dilemma where, if you're making money off of the war, why would you stop? You're the ones that profiting off of it. So it's kind of like you're incentivizing privatizing, incarcerating people in prisons, making it making it profitable and making it something to be sought out and to be, manipulated. Really.
Yeah, I mean that comes down to like institutions perpetuate the problems that they're meant to solve. Like the large military system of the United States, right? Obviously, they're not trying to sit around and do stuff. Or if you run a private prison, right, you want more prisoners, and maybe you're lobbying to have harsher mandatory minimum sentences on non-violent drug crimes. Things like all of that, because it's a private system, right? Or schools perpetuating. You need to have this, it's the stamp of approval, because why are we collecting all these large fees, and why people coming here if all of the information is already free online?
And they need a lot of dropout students to pay their tuition for the first year.
Sure.
That definitely helps them.
If you look at just like with war specifically, if you look at your likelihood of dying in a war, that's way down. It's always better. The future. There's a good book called not predictably irrational. It's called The Rational Optimist by Matt Ridley, and it really goes like into a mathematical, very structured analysis as to why really every measurable metric, every place on Earth is getting better overall on average. Some places obviously aren't better than before, like North Korea, but your likelihood of dying as a child is down. There's like a lot of really good examples, like the cost of light. Like for 1 hour of reading light in like the 1500s, you need like a fat candle, made of fat. It cost you say it was like 50% of your day's wages just to have like an hour of reading light. And then now it's like electricity is an hour of reading light is free, more or less, right? So a lot of people have that luxury of being able to stay up later at night and educate themselves or entertain themselves, right? So your likelihood of dying in a war is down. Gun violence is down. Like specifically, maybe gun violence in schools is going up, but your overall likelihood of dying due to gun violence is down. Everything is always getting better. But if you're only watching the news doesn't report on positive aspects like that, because it's boring. It doesn't get people shares.
That's right.
Like you mentioned right at the beginning, it's that fear that really drives that. Like the institution of news is perpetuating people being scared and wanting to tune in, because if you look at the news, it's always problems that people aren't really meant to know about, like someone was shot over on this other street as well. Your likelihood of dying just because someone was shot, maybe it was close to you, but overall your likelihood of dying isn't any higher. Like if you get your house broken into, a lot of people will go and buy locks on their house afterwards, but it doesn't really change the probability that you're going to be broken into again, right? It's like just that fear mongering, right? It's that's institution. So.
And it's a great conspiracy where before the ads were the ads and the content was the content, but now it's very good, meticulous work they do. What they do is they promote violence and that fear mongering through the media. They talk about catastrophes and people dying and all those things, and then after that they cut to the commercial where say drink Coca-Cola, comfort, security, and that's exactly what they do. They say, look at how terrible all this is. Make sure you stop at Safeway on your way home. Make sure you have all your comforts, and that's really interesting to see how that's kind of that's why so many people have gone away from regular television. They're just and they don't trust the media anymore because it's become that kind of system where it's not even the content anymore. The content is the commercials because that's what's
Yeah,
profitable. That's what they make money off of.
absolutely. But then, of course, you have the technological evolution of the internet. So you have the ability of people to move away from that now, right? So it's like the free marketplace of competing with sources of information, right? If there was not that innovation of Twitter for people,
Yeah.
like I follow like a lot of smart people on Twitter,
Mm-hmm.
like you wouldn't have other options. So it ties into a lot of what we were talking about before of just increasing innovation, increasing people competition. So of course, like before, the news, but it's also a cycle where it feeds off each other, right? So like
Yeah.
less people watch the news, they gotta get like your profits up, and then it's
Yeah.
does that more and more and
But I
more.
guess it's all
Ultimately,
that
it
thing
gets
of,
weeded out.
for sure, it's really coming down to where people say, well, it's great to have all these things, but when you get down to it, it becomes so complicated, and it becomes so diluted that people lose touch with what the news does and what everything's going on. And it's people, when they talk to each other, they say, what's your source? Oh, it's a recognized media source. Oh, it's a there's always that certification, right? That having that piece of paper from university to say, I know what I'm talking about. I have a piece of paper that say I'm certified expert. And then you have, oh, this is the media, they're the experts, they're the people you listen to, and you don't listen to YouTubers or online media, because they're not real sources. They're not actual journalists. Yet it's kind of, that is the case. People are getting their information and from online and open source, and random people that don't have commercials, they don't have sponsors, they just read the news and then they talk about it, and that becomes bigger and more, bigger platforms than even just like Pew News, right? The biggest channel on YouTube. He talks about random things, and that becomes the biggest medium, where the media is super jealous. They're like, how is he getting this many views? It's unbelievable. And they get really mad because what he's doing is working, and they're seeing that their legitimacy is dying out, especially with journalism, kind of paper journalism or magazine journalism is kind of a thing of the past, and not really, people are really transitioning into the internet age. So obviously it's always lacking behind. It's always, things are always catching up to realizing the change of the status quo, I guess, in the marketplace.
Yeah, absolutely. That ties into some good ideas. I think the Psalm to lead, as he says, I'm trying to paraphrase here. So if there's two doctors in the same hospital, and they have the same qualifications, like they're both trained to be doctors, like there's no difference there. And you go into the first guy's office, and he's some really well polished, good looking guy. He's got the stethoscope on his head. He's got the white lab coat on. Clean shaven. Really looks like a doctor. Like he's got a warm smile, and he says, "Okay, well, if we're gonna have a surgery, he looks like a doctor. He looks like someone we could trust, right? He just looks like the stereotypical
Yeah.
trustworthy doctor, right? He's just a nice guy." Then you go to the other room for a second opinion. You see this Eastern European. He's short, fat. Maybe smoking a cigarette. He's got stains on his clothes. He's got ruffled hair. He's unshaven. Kind of looks like just like doesn't look like a doctor at all.
Yeah.
Like what would be then the person you would choose to perform surgery on you?
That's a really good question. I guess most people would go right off of appearance and pick the one that looks the most qualified and the one that looks the most professional. And I guess that's why advertisers, that's why they want to monetize specific kind of content, or obviously Disney doesn't want to have advertisement on inappropriate things, or they don't want to, they want to control what they advertise, and that kind of makes sense. There's no, that's not,
But
you know
yeah, like you said, who people are now gravitating towards. Who you should pick is the other guy, this Eastern European guy who doesn't look like a doctor. because the point is that it's his skill as a doctor is why he's there. If it's not in his appearance, and if it's not the qualifications, what else could there be? Why is this guy still around if he looks like shit, and people aren't using him because it's really he's got the most real value, the most real skill. So in terms of media, there used to be a lot more blogs, and I think I'm sure I've seen a lot more of these on Twitter too, of anonymous people coming around. And in the past, you had anonymous blogs where people found them really just based on the ideas that they shared, not their qualifications, their credentials. Like the ideas had to stand up on their own.
Yeah.
Right. Versus and now too, you can't hide your true thoughts on Twitter. Is that if you're anonymous, there's no real. I mean, I guess you can build like a brand over time, but you're anonymous, right? You're not if you're not revealing your identity, you could be anyone. Sure, you could build a brand, but you could be some anywhere in the world.
You can be a parody page.
Background.
Yeah.
But as long as your ideas stand up, that's all that matters, right? So I think that's hopefully what people are moving towards, and then you have the free platforms to give these free people freedom of speech and allow people to find it. And sure, you're gonna get like you say, you get those echo chambers or whatever, but otherwise the alternative is worse anyway. So
yeah, awesome. Well, I guess we've been going on for an hour and a half, so I guess we'll go around and everybody have last statements. Ian, what are your last thoughts?
Well, Michael, it's really good chatting with you. Definitely the research you've been doing recently. It sounds like you've been getting in some good books and stuff. And yeah, it's just been good chatting to you again.
Awesome. So give us your last words.
Yeah, Ian, for sure. We'll have to catch up too when you're in Toronto, and Dom as well. If you're down here, happy to go grab a drink or something sometimes. But a lot of the things I read is a lot of the science and philosophy. Try to read a little bit of math too, but I don't really get to whenever I'm interested in it's just for mental models and things like that. But it's always good to follow guys like Naval on Twitter and Nassam Taleb actually has some really good books. Like Skin in the Game is probably one of the best books I've read in the longest time. Up there with Sapiens. So check out Skin in the Game. He's got a lot of really good ideas there. I think you guys would really appreciate that. His other ones are good too. Black Swan.
Awesome.
Fooled by Randomness. He's a very smart polymath, and him. So just keep reading. I guess just have a good chat sometime whenever you're down.
Yeah, Michael, do you ever want to shout yourself out anywhere, or your LinkedIn or Instagram or anything like that?
No, I'm good. I mean, if someone really wants to get in touch with me, they can go through my agent Dom here.
Yeah.
Okay.
Cool. Well, I really appreciate everything you've done, and I will definitely look up those books. This year I actually took on the challenge of reading a book a week, so I'm falling a little bit behind, but I'm still keeping up with it.
I gotta say something about this too. Sorry, don't when you're reading, you can read it a lot more if you don't hold it yourself. Just the goal should be just to read as much as you can.
Yeah.
Right, but if you're trying to read a book, don't worry about not finishing the book. Cause I thought I have to say this because I thought the exact same way too. And then I would read a book and I would get tired of it, or I would come to a part and I said I don't want to read this anymore, and I would not just stop reading that, but I would stop reading entirely.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and then you go for a period, you go for a month, and you say, oh, I got to finish this book.
Yeah.
And then you haven't read for a month, right? So if you're reading, don't feel bad about throwing a book away or skipping ahead a few chapters, or you don't want to you want to learn to not get bored of reading, just get bored of that specific part in the book. So having goals and stuff and all that is fine, and for your own reading, but try to keep it not necessarily one specific book a week, but just read read maybe the equivalent of a book a week. But
that's really good advice. I appreciate that. That's great.
Yeah, it's just a mental model that I developed because I was always reading, and that's something that happened to me personally. But I mean, you can manage that yourself, of course. But
yeah. Well, I mean, it's been hard lately because I've been, I've been taking a couple of courses, so I've been focusing mostly on reading the books and for class, and all the articles that you have to read on top of that. Just it piles up so much, so it's hard to kind of fit in luxury side books that you just kind of want to read. So yeah, again, thank you so much for being my guest, and I appreciate everybody watching and all the comments and the questions we've had. So this is episode 5, I believe. So yeah, we're off to a really good start, and we're actually probably gonna have one more podcast in the studio, and then I'm actually moving back to Winnipeg, so we'll be starting up a new studio, an actual permanent studio space there, and I'll be there, but I'll still be doing interviews and traveling around regardless. But yeah, thank you so much to everybody, and yeah, we'll see you in the next one. Take care.
Yeah, absolutely. Best of luck with all of it in the future.
Thank you so much.
Have a good night, everyone.
Peace out.